Welcome to this new topic, Environmental Impact Assessment, Introduction to Environmental Impact Assessment for EIA. In this, um, this is a very important component of it, which engineers need to know, because this is more like a culmination of other things what we studied, other different aspects of pollution and conservation we studied. It culminates here because how to compile all the understanding. We'll see that, we'll explore more about it. So let's start with the first unit. So in introductions, we are going to discuss about the historical development of the environmental impact assessment and what are the EIA project cycle, and some of the legal and regulatory aspects in India, and what are the different types of EIA and what are the limitations of EIA, and different sectors, also cross sectoral issues, and what are the within the EIA, and public participation, importance of that, and how it is getting carried out. Then EIA, then go for little more details about EIA process, which includes screening, scoping, setting, analysis, and mitigations. Let's dive into this. Now, to define EIA, environmental impact assessment is a formal process for identifying likely effect. So likely effects means what? The effect has not taken place. It's not an activity is leading the effect. It is some effect is expected to come of activities or projects on the environment. What are the environmental effects? And what else? Human health effects and welfare effects. There are three things. And an effect related to environment, or affecting human health, human toxicity, toxicity and all sorts of things, and welfare, of course. Welfare deals something on sociological aspects also. Family relationship and all things as part of that. So that means what? It is a means and measure to mitigate and monitor this impact. So there are two things. One is that projecting what type of effect can happen if such activities or such type of projects are taken place. It's not taken place so far, because EIA approval only in some of the projects, especially the EIA approval or EIA clearance, is necessary to go for the project. Without that, it is not even allowed to get the projects. So that's why it is likely effects study, evaluate likely effects based on our present understanding of the topics, past experiences, and also not only just what are the effects, also what are the means to measure the effects, what are the means to study the effects, what are the means to measure the effects, and what are the steps you can take to mitigate it, remove it, and how to monitor that mitigation activity taken place. All the things should come in the EIA report. Only after that there will be clearance for the project to be executed. So now here is the word environment is a very keyword. So what are different aspects of environment we are going to talk about that? One is physical, biological, and social. Physical means soil, land, mountains, rivers, all the things are physical environment. What are impacts common to that? When air, water, they're all physical. Biological refers to other living organisms like plants, animals, when human beings. And social, mostly about exchanges among different individuals, societal. That also comes in EIA. For example, if there is a mining taking place, in that case, there is physical impacts will be onto the groundwater, the leaching, drainage, the drainage water of the mines leached into the groundwater, polluting that, and all things. The physical environment, physical impacts. Biological impacts will be affecting the many flora and fauna. The biological effects. And social means people are shifted now. Now the social setups are being affected, so that will be social effects. But because social also very intricately related with the people's maintenance overall environment. So we'll talk about what specific aspects of that, how do you consider that in EIA methodologies. Today's this particular units we are going to talk about the basics. So now EIA in EIA the term impact is used. You can see the word likely effects or activities. Environmental impact assessment. Impact. What is impact? Now you are not using effects or activities. An activity done, there is effects. But what is not done, you're projecting the possible effects of the activities. Then they call impact. We'll see what impact is all about. So impact of an activity is deviation or change from the baseline situation that causes activities. Okay. So what is the baseline then? See the right side. The baseline is the existing environmental situation or condition in the absence of the activities. That means activities without that activities, how environmental situation is maintained there. What is the environmental niche there? How it is maintained? What are the things? What are the different parameters? How they are operating? How it is maintained? So it's most like equilibrium conditions. So for example, like air, what is the air status? What is the composition of air presently? Now if industry takes place or certain activity takes place, will composition vary? There is deviation from the existing situation baseline. So before studying, baseline is very crucial. Baseline situation is key concept in AA. Without baseline, how you even evaluate it? It is improving or going down. Both are there. Both are impacts. Well, one positive impact, negative impacts. Sometimes positive impact may be there. It may be helping for some type of growth or certain species. Sometimes it will affect another. At the same time, it will affect another things. So it can have positive and negative impacts. So for that, all the impacts we need to have baseline informations. To measure impact, you must know what the baseline situations. And based on the baseline situations, that means you have to initial study to find out what is the baseline situation with respect to all the parameters. This is a biodiversity with respect to physical parameters and social parameters. All the things has to monitor first. Then only it is possible to evaluate the impact it can yield to with respect to each of the criteria. And then only you can say what type of measurement or measures you should take for mitigation of the impact, minimization of impacts. Now here precisely concerned with all types of impacts. We are talking impacts. Now previous slides we saw about impacts. It means changes from baseline situations. Now this sort of changes from baseline situations, it can describe in different ways. Impact can be direct impact or indirect impact. Immediately affect direct means your activity directly creating that. That means it leads to something else, and finally impact will be on physical, biological, and social parameters. Something. It could be short term, long term. Immediately you will get it, or after long time you will get it. Adverse or beneficial. Impact can be, as I mentioned before, impact can be beneficial also. For example, you are putting some reservoir or something. So there are beneficial impacts also there. What are beneficial impacts? Maybe aquatics can grow better way. There is no obstruction for that. Even sometimes navigation can take place. Like that, some beneficial. But there are adverse effect also because of reservoir seismicity will be there, and so many other complications are indirect effects. Direct effects. So both direct and indirect both has to be measured, and some the adverse and beneficial both impacts has to be obtained. Then cumulative impacts, overall impacts. So any project you go through that, you first evaluate all the different types of impacts. How you evaluate with respect to what? We get through intensity of the impact or direction impact, which direction taking place, spatial impact, how much area is covered in the impact, duration, how long it lasted, frequency, does it keep on repeated over time, reversibility, can you reverse back, and probability, what are the present chances of it doing certain things. So they are the certain impacts. So the probability impacts, the impact can be reversed, impact can be freed, or impact, what is duration impact, how frequently take place, the direction impact, which direction it comes, and all the informations all refers to different types of different ways of understanding impact. But all impacts are not treated equally. Why? Because especially geographical areas, we have particular set of socio-psychological setups of people. So every impact will not be considered equally by the people. And for that matter, they are not considered equal with respect to polluting environment either. Now, since we have got bunch of activities, you can say first definition we are talking about likely effects of activities. So, what is effect of activities in ESA? An activity is a desired accomplishment of output. There is some output, estimate output, and expected output, and you do something to get that output, you call it activities. So activity must have purpose, whether not activities. Any specific desired purpose. Clear the purpose is, activity will be more focused. Example, a road, seedling productions, or river diversions into irrigation lands, all of them activities. Now, there is another term called actions. So for each activity consists of a set of actions. For example, access marketing point through road and rehabilitations. So first 2 points can be covered by so many ways. The marketing place access means you have to do survey of that, grading status of that, then culvert made also. Then so there this way each activity will have a bunch of actions. Actions need to be verified and checked. Then activity automatically taken care of. So here, Siri got little distracted. We're discussing about impact of activities. So activity is desired accomplishment of output. So road, sealing productions, river diversions, all are very specific goals. Accomplishing the goal is called activities. Activity is made up of many small components called actions. So for that, for making a road, we need to survey, we need to grading of the roads, we need to make the culverts below that, we need to construct that, we need compaction that, all the activities required to make the road. Why need a road? For accessing market. There is a purpose. For accessing market, you need a road, and for the road, there is actions. So a project or program may consist of many such activities, and each activities will have many such actions. So impact of each of the actions is what covered in EIA. Understand the proposed activities, why the activity is being proposed, and what is being proposed. They're very important. For understanding something, we have to first these two questions: why and what. All EIA process begins with understanding what is being proposed, what you proposed, and why you are proposing. For example, why is the activity being proposed? Is answered with the development of, is answered with the development objective. What is it? Object must have some objective to develop. Constructing road for what purpose? Building a road is not a objective. Building a road is for increasing market access. That's all. Simply building a road, what is the meaning of that? The proper purpose. So it is very important to have identify the proper purpose. You got development objective. Then for that objective, that building a road is one option. Is there any other option to accomplish the objective? Then all the actions, all the activities, and then what are the actions involved that? Then you have to evaluate them. To estimate that whether this approach is right, or reliable or not. So you must understand the development objective to identify the environmental sound alternatives. Once you understand the development objective, we must fully understand what is being proposed. Why proposed you understand, and what exactly proposed. Primary activities: construction of diversion dam in irrigation canal. Access to the market is the objective, but action is diversity, and construction diversion dam and irrigation canal. Then what are activities involved in there? Actions involved: survey, negotiating land tenure, construct the borrow pit, establish construction camp, construct temporary diversion structures, dispose of soil debris. So many activities. So many actions, which includes the major activity of construct diversion dam and irrigation canal. So you must fully understand what are all the actions proposed, what are all actions included in the activities. Non-impact assessment. Now let's come to more fundamental understanding of that. Assessment of the beneficial and adverse changes of the environmental resources or values resulting from proposed project. Is it very clear? Benefit and adverse effects or changes in the environmental resources or values from a proposed project. Then what are proposed project, as I mentioned, project is not done yet. It has to be clear first. Essential elements: identification of possible positive and negative impacts of the projects. What is positive, negative, and not negative impact? This is the first part. Second part, quantifying. Similarly, identifying what type of possible negative, positive is not sufficient. Quantifying the impacts with respect to common base. Now let's get into the historical development of this. There is National Environmental Policy Act. It is somewhere 1969 in the United States. This is the forerunner behind the EIA, and tools, techniques, and even the thoughts of EIA. So, in 1969, when this policy was forwarded, and then which led to establishment of Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. You might have heard about that, EPA, the pioneering body of environmental estimation, evaluation, and advocacy. Not only for United States, right now for all over the world, they are getting inspired by this. So, Environmental Protection Agency, 1970, it was created based on this. Proposed statement that each person has a fundamental and inalienable right to a healthful environment. Every individual has a right. Inalienable means alien means foreign. Inalienable own right. Proposed statements of each person has a fundamental and inalienable right of healthful environment. That weekend too, each person should enjoy a healthful environment. A right for that, or should enjoy more dilute form of that. NEPA preamble reads to declare national policy which will encourage productive and enjoyable harmony between man and his environment, to promote efforts will prevent the eliminate damage to the environment and biosphere, and stimulate the health and welfare of man. And this is the understanding of the ecological systems and natural resources important to the nations. So NEPA has two sections: the creation of national policy on the protection and restoration of environmental quality, and for that, action forcing provisions that ensure the federal agencies consider national environmental policy in their decision making process. So national environmental policy, the action we proposed or provisions mentioned that should be taken into account for all decision making processes with respect to developmental efforts by all other departments too. So this is the first. There are two sections. One is for creation of the such policy, and second thing is that enforcing actions by such policies. Then it requires federal officials to prepare a detailed environmental impact statement. So it involves two things: EIA and ES. Environmental assessment, then a statement based on assessment. So the probable environmental impact for any major area evolved into EIA and ES, environmental statement and environmental impact assessment. So this for development. So it must involve the public, because publics are going to stay there. So when this is presented, they can have their own grievances expressing what changes can be made, because they have experience of that. And plus, aid in decision making, because these tools will help us to evaluate different options for the same development objective. So you can, based on the environmental impact, you can have a better decision making. Explore feasible alternatives. So once this is understood, then you can find what other alternatives are feasible for this situation, because you are clear about the problems you are facing. So these are major advantage you can get. Since its enactment in NEPA has resulted in the preparation of over 15,000 EIAs. See that? As I mentioned, it is a pioneer in EIA all over the world. So 15,000 EIA has been prepared. During the first 10 years of NEPA, 1,000 EIAs were prepared annually. Recently, negotiated an improvement to the environmental impact during the EIA process has become increasingly common. So now environmental impact. So NEPA's after the initiative of United States about NEPA, and so the other countries took over. So established various forms throughout the world. Developed such type of developed countries first: Canada, Australia, Germany. After US, these three countries followed off. EIA in developing countries has spread due to the policy of funding agencies such as the United Nations Environmental Program and World Bank, 1991 respectively. So these national environment, United Nations Environmental Program and World Bank, they provide a lot of financial sanctions for developing country or help. So this type of the motivation in developing countries came because of, if they don't maintain that, then if they don't power clearance, then people will not purchase things. So that's why developing countries are involved quite often. Directive 85/337 regions. So this EC is European Council. So they given directives 85/337. And what they given? They given regions concerned about the physical environment and eager to prevent further deteriorations. So concerned about the physical environment, and you want to reduce the deterioration further. Wish to ensure no distortion of the competitions should arise. There should not be any competitions arise when one member state can gain under unfair advantage by permitting developments that the environmental regions might be refused another member state. So sometimes poor member states are being exploited by rich member states in the name of technology to accomplish that. So those things also he was against. So DIA, then after the United States, UK taken further initiative. So formal legislation was not enacted in UK until 1988. This was the form of several laws that enabled the European directive. This one, 85/337 EEC. Then prior to 1988, many EIAs were prepared voluntarily by the developers and or at the request of local authorities. So local authority may ask to do something, or the volunteer to do something, or social mileage. And guidelines for EIA preparation were drawn up. Prior to 2088 is how it is going on. Overall prior to the European directives, DOE remained skeptical. DOE Department of Environment skeptical for EIA and was described from the outset as grudging and minimalistic. So there is, as you can see, there is a skeptical perspective from different fronts, considered the grudging and minimalistic. In Moyes 1999, the amendment to 85/337 EEC, European Directive 97 by 11 was enacted in the UK. Why need the EIA? Derived from European Council's directive, first introduced in 1985. As per that, what is the need of EIA? EIA applies to all major projects that need planning permission under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. All major projects working under Town and Country Planning country should work on the city. And to many projects outside the planning system, which require authorization from other bodies. So it divided into Schedule 1, Schedule 2. Schedule 1 always needs EIA, Schedule 2 always needs EIB. Schedule 2 only needs EIA if significant environmental impacts are likely to arise. If not significant, then don't have to go EIA. Schedule 1 is sufficient. Schedule 2 will go further, more detailed. So environmental protection. So now we'll come to India. Now we saw that how developed countries, how to the basis of their growth, EIA concepts, how starting from EPA, It was used in different countries, different degrees. And in India, EIA has been the cornerstone of the policies and procedures governing the industrial and other development activities in India. Ministry of Environment and Forest, MOEF, right now it is called Ministry of Environment, Forest and Social and Climate Change. Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change has taken several policy initiatives and enacted environmental and pollution control legislation to legislation to prevent the discriminate exploitation of natural resources and to promote integration of environmental concern in developmental projects. Once the initiative is notification and environmental impact. So we are seeing here Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, they have taken so many steps in different mitigation measures, but they find that and EIA is one such notification, one such steps, one such direction to work on environment. Now let's see what is the purpose. So first purpose is to protect environment, because the best way to protect environment, because it reduces, not recycle or reuse, reduces itself. From beginning itself you use minimum requirement. So and design and planning, integration of emerging designs into EIA ensures a proposal with the latest damaging environmental effects. I'll have all the different designs which fits to that with respect to the environmental impacts, can lead to considerable alternative approaches and lead to more robust step applications. Adding designing and planning, transparent and systematic presentation of environmental information, assist the authorities' assessments to help the allay general public concerns. So the other design stage should include it. That your personal perspective, all the things should include design stage itself. Not after everything done you bring to public. No, design stage itself involves public participations. Every step it is transparent. And then comes to management. Use of EIA as a managerial tool for contributing by environmental risk assessment, all hazards at design stage. Design them out, ensuring that risks are managed throughout the project. So it's a managerial tool. A person, a organization or government bodies can manage, because based on the risk you will manage which stage. So the project you should be able to manage. Now, how do you estimate the environmental impact? In one terms, it's called environmental impact value. Although separately studied, but environmental impact value gives one number representation of the environmental loading, possible environmental loading, possible environmental impacts. So here EIV, environmental impact value, is equal to summation of I equals 1 to n VI WI. That means V1 W1 plus V2 W2, like this continue to N1 V Vn Wn. So all the additions, and in this case the V is the environmental quality. This particular parameter is talking about quality parameters. It could be pH, water quality, it could be deforestation, it could be whatever, sociological aspects, and each one has different weightage. As I mentioned, it's not equal weighted, everything on different weights. So the total number of the different weights for each of the category, and total number of environmental parameters n. How many n parameters based on that many additions. It's simple, clear. Now average impact is more, plus or minus more is severe. Plus more is severe with respect to good, minus more is minus 5 is severe with respect to negative impacts. Same thing, higher 4, plus or minus 4, moderate plus or minus 3, low plus or minus 2, very low plus or minus 1, no change 0. So these are the different activities and plotted that. So based on this parameter will only evaluate a single number indicating the overall environmental loading because of this. All parameters are not equally important in weight, I saw that. Varies from community to community. Bangladesh, flood, employment, agriculture, fisheries carry more importance. So next slide, a summary of the relative importance of the parameters for Thana project is presented. Not next exactly, here, after a few more slides. Okay, now let's see here. Here are the different procedures. First, preparatory work, study the existing reports and information there. The data collection, then all literature sources you have to go through, even some theses and projects and all things. And then data analysis, convert the changes to convert to change scale, because all of them should be consistent. And then impact assessment, relative weight. Each of these categories, what is the relative weight is provided. And finally, mitigation and monitoring plan. What is the mitigation plan? What are the problems? What is the mitigation plan? Mitigation means what is the plan to counteract the effects proposed. And what is the monitoring plan? Whether the mitigation measures have been monitored or not. So the previous reports. These are the different things EIA need to be carried out. I'll show you some of the EIA reports in online after recovering some of the basics. Now the phase 1. As I mentioned, phase 1 is necessary, but phase 2 may not necessary. Only those who qualify phase 1 and send to phase 2, that may be more detailed. Initial inquiry is phase 1. So initial inquiry is simply understand the proposed activities, whatever activity you are doing, screening, whether it comes under EIA requirement or not. That's how screening takes place. If it not come, then it's okay, you can carry on. If it comes, then they will take it back. So just understand the proposed activities, screen, conduct a preliminary assessment. Then phase 2. After phase 1 over, then phase 2. In phase 2, only if when it's needed, you can do that. And physical inquiry signifies that if it is very significant, or legally it is required to be done, mandatory, because there are some criteria there, which if in this case it has to be done. So in that case, you can go for second phase. Here, you can go for scoping. After the screening already over, and second phase started scoping. Scoping means what is scope? What is the total boundary within which you want to find information? Because if you keep on collecting information and it keeps on expanding, because different areas, different parameters will keep on multiplying. So then where are you going to stop? Step. So in that case, you create a scope. We'll see some things, how it's done. Then evaluate a baseline situation. As I mentioned, within baseline you cannot do anything further. Identify and choose alternatives. What are the different alternatives you can identify? Identify and characterize the potential impacts of proposed activities in each alternative. And then development, mitigation and monitoring, and then communicate and document. After that, public hearing and all things can take place. So I'm sure these are clear. First to divide once screening is over, then you can carry out the initial inquiries for EIA, and sometimes it's okay. You can go ahead in second level EIA is not required, second phase not required. But if it is legally required as per the law, because some of the areas it has to be done, some of this domain it has to be done, it's must, or it is too significant than expected. The annual impact is knowingly significant. In that case, EIA has to get it out. In that case, second phase will come, full EIA. And in that case, now you have to give scope, how much you will be able to cover. Then we have to give what is present situation, existing baseline data. Then you can explain what are the different alternatives available, the options available. Now each of the options, identify and characterize the potential impacts the proposed activities. Each option, what are the activities you done and what are the different potential impacts for each of the activities. Develop mitigation and monitoring plan. After that, what are the impact based on some mitigation plan and how to monitor the mitigation plan implementations. And after all this thing over, then nothing started so far. It is just a detailed studies before the activity takes place. Because only after EIA approval you are supposed to carry out, execute the project. Without you cannot execute. And so final stage communication. Environmental statement, yes or EIA. So this is how the cycle takes place. So first site selections, environmental screening, initial assessment, scoping for significant issues. Okay, any specific issues. So this it starts. Then detailed assessment of significant impacts. You are going to phase 2. Identification of mitigation needs, input to cost benefit analysis, pre-feasibility. Then feasibility, detailed design of mitigation measures. Then design I will take this. Design, you have to keep in mind the implementation of the mitigation measures and environmental strategy. Then if they implement it, then monitoring and post auditing lessons for future projects. So then monitoring evaluations and this then so this certain project concept coming here then, and then after evaluation you may have to change the concept again, redo that if you are not able to address satisfactorily. So this is how it takes place. So now we have already covered that, understand proposed activities, why and what. Then you screen it, activities what, to what level of the EIA required or not, what level required. Moderate or unknown risk is there. In that case, you go for moderate or unknown. Then you go for a rapid simplified EIA studies. The simple tools. So they got rapid EIA to carry it out. And in this case, if rapid EIA, it involves again 2 phases. Significant adverse impacts possible. What type of adverse impacts, significant impacts are going to happen, and what is significant adverse impact, very likely, unlikely, may not happen. Okay, adverse impacts, and one option is which is possible to happen, other is unlikely. Then what begin the then similarly, if activity is of low risk, is for moderate or unknown risk, low risk, then you are unlikely to have significant adverse impacts, may not be there. So in that case, you stop the EIA process. Then activities at high risk of its nature, likely to have significant adverse impacts, in that case direct for full EIA. So significant impacts will full EIA, and high risk will full EIA, and significant adverse impact very unlikely, in that case no need to do that. Or activities is low risk, in that case also don't have to do that. So this is how you choose whether to do or not. Screening phase. So screen each activity based on the nature of the activity, what level of environmental analysis is required. So what level of analysis is required? Screening is the process of asking very basic sets of questions about the nature of the activities. These questions do not require analysis, do not require knowledge about the proposed sites, techniques, and methods. So here you are asking this screening stage, we are going to ask this type of questions. Those activities don't require analysis, those don't require knowledge about the proposed sites and the techniques they used and the methods applied. Example, those screening questions: does the activity involve penetration of road building? Does the activity involve large scale irrigations? Does the activity involve introduction of nano or non-native crop or agroforestry species? So these are the different type of question asking. Does it have? Does it create? So these are this different. If they're different way, you can screen it activity. Screen each activities. Activity will have its own actions. So each activity has to screen based on the nature of the activity, what level and not analysis indicated. Screening classifies activity into risk categories. So as to screening, we have low risk, high risk, and moderate risk. We already saw that. Low risk means what? EIA ends here. High risk means do full EIA. Moderate or unknown risk, to assess and do preliminary assessment. What preliminary assessment? The outcome of the screening process determines the next step in the EIA process. This preliminary assessment. What a preliminary assessment means a rapid, simplified EIA using the simple tools. The purpose of preliminary assessment is to provide documentation and analysis that allows the preparer to determine whether or not significant adverse impacts are likely. The documents will provide that information, is likely or not. Allows the reviewers to agree or disagree with the preparers determinations. May agree or disagree. It allows that. Sets out mitigation and monitoring and adverse impacts. These are the basic components for the purpose of EIA. It's a thorough documentation, you should have thorough mitigation plans, you should have proper estimation of likelihood of certain thing happen, all the things to take into account. Then previously we saw that here. Screening determines whether the preliminary assessment is necessary or not. After screening, we got preliminary assessment continues. So type of preliminary assessment, background studies. The preliminary assessment also involves, we'll come to that. Background studies, what is the present background, description, baseline distance, this is the point. So preliminary assessment also includes what is the background, what is the situation, what the activities taken place, what thing will happen, what are the people staying there, all the things. And what is the status of the physical, biological. Started? Okay, I'll join. I'm in class. I'm in a class, I'll join up. Evaluation of potential and impacts, mitigation and monitoring, and recommended findings. So these are the different. So for each activities it covers, preliminary assessment has 3 possible findings. What? The project is very unlikely to have significant adverse impacts. Okay. Or specified mitigation and monitoring, the project is unlikely to have significant adverse impacts. So now you can see that it may not have any significant impacts, or if you take the mitigation and monitoring into account, you carry it out, then effect may not be significant. Or the project is likely to have significant impact assessment. So all 3 are there. So if likely to have, then thorough or full EIA is required. It's not likely to have, then EIA not ends there. If it is likely to have, but if you specific mitigation measures, monitoring measures you take, control measures you take, then it will not be so significant. So based on that, the preliminary assessment is carried out. This is a place where we also do the baseline situation evaluations. What is the ML impacts evaluations and mitigation? All the 5 things is carried out to get these 3 conclusions from that. To arrive at findings, identify, predict and judge. Arrive at the findings in a preliminary assessment requires 3 steps. Identify potential impact. Many resources describe the potential impact of typical small scale activities. Predict the potential impact. Determine which potential impacts are likely to become actual, and quantify these impacts to the extent possible. Third, judge the significance of potential impacts. So what is going here? To arrive any findings, we have 3: identify, predict, judge. Identify the impacts, predict the potential of the impacts, and then judge the significance of that. Determine whether the predicted impact is indeed significant. This will often depend on how effective the proposed mitigation measures. Mitigation measures include that, whether it's still going to be impact is significant or not. Then full EIA involves, the full EIA study has similar objectives and structures to the preliminary assessment. However, the full EIA study differs in important ways. What are the ways it differs? Formal scoping process precedes the study, and to ID issues to be addressed, the specific issues to be addressed. So the formal scoping process is required for that. For scoping is not required actually in your preliminary EIA, but here scoping is required. Now you have to find the scope of that, how depth you can go. Then analysis of environmental impacts is much more details. Each impact you have to go very detailed impacts with detailed quantification, primary data and secondary data, and some all the things required. Then many tools are also provided for that. We'll talk about that in other units. Alternatives must be formally defined. What are the different alternatives available for that? Preliminary alternative may not be necessary to define. Just that particular things is required not with that present alternative. Here you have to propose other alternatives also. Alternative must be identified and evaluated. Each alternative has to be evaluated and naturally has to be compared. Then public participation is required, but here public can be also involved, should be involved. Professional EIA team is usually required and professional EIA team. But preliminary professional teams are not required. Persons having experience in some expertise can carry it out. But professional team will be interdisciplinary ID team. Here no study of the ID, interdisciplinary issues. We address in these issues are multiple disciplines. So these things are addressed here. So naturally, a professional teams will includes different experts. For example, some sociologists will be required, sometimes economists will be required, in addition to agronomists may be required, or geologists may be required, microbiologist may be required, depending upon the type of the issues involved. So a separate group can be constructed. So these are the things which are full study involves. Initial studies, you'll see they don't have those things. You just identify, predict, and judge it. And for that is background studies, description of the baseline, what is baseline situation description, evaluation of potential impacts. That's all. We're not going to have expert streams to going further details. Details each quantification not required. Overall baseline situation and then estimation based on that. To come to this conclusion of whether significant, not significant, or with specific mitigation and monitoring not significant, or it is significant anyway, even with this. Okay, so these are the 4 additional things. So with few additions, the basic outlines of preliminary assessment is the template for this test involving full assessment. So you add those things when mentioned become full assessment. So here what else is background, development objectives, a list of activities. So this NV required, description baseline situation NV required, evaluation of potential environmental impacts required, mitigation monitoring required, recommended finding. These are all basically part of the initial ones. And here in full EIA studies, we have now you get a detailed scope of that. Then evaluation of baseline situations. Here also baseline situations. Description, here detailed evaluation of that. Identification of choosing different alternatives is not there. Identify the characteristic impacts and proposed activities and each alternatives. Activities there before, but now each alternative also has added here. The green colors are added. Compare the alternatives. That was not there before. Here, develop mitigation monitoring. That is anyway there. The white things are already there, and these blue things are added for the template for the detailed or full EIA studies. And all through the documentation, communications, and of course interaction, public hearing. They are not there initially. In full EIA studies, in summary, is a far more significant efforts than preliminary assessment, reserved for activities for which screening or the preliminary assessment shows that significant impact is likely. Then only you have to do that. Who involved in EIA? Sponsor of the activities, usually commissioners and conductors EIA. Means what? The industry organization who is setting up, they have to imply. It's not that somebody outsiders have to do. Not government come and do that. They have to do that. They have to submit the report for the ministry to assess and give clearance. Ministry will not come and do that. So sponsor of the activities is going to do that. They have to collect they have to have the groups and carry out. Regulatory agencies, reviews, authorities, and broad-based public. So regulatory authority review are the review authorities, and public also have their own comments to say. They are the stakeholders in that. Apart from that, now communities, men, women, civil society, private sector, they can also be involved if this related to their field. Everybody is full right to enter and contribute their opinions. But sponsor of the activities is the organization itself. Public consultation is usually required for full EIA studies, we discussed already. However, it is good practice to preliminary assessment. For preliminary assessment also better to involve the public by predicting impacts are facilitated by the broad-based public consultation, because we will have wide range of options, orientations we get. Judging significance is very difficult without that, because people will have their orientation options. The brainstorming will help to have better understanding. Transparency and accessibility require disclosure of stakeholders. Stakeholder you have disclosed who are the stakeholders, who are the person involved with the activities in different states, benefits of the activities, all the including stakeholders. So it should be very transparent, very clearly mentioned. Making EIA effective, integral part of the project development cycle, EIA. I need the honest approach and transparent and accessible. Anybody can access to that and be transparently presented. So they are very important component of EIA. EIA, so integral part of the project means what? EIA is undertaken early enough to affect the project design. Before design stage is EIA taken. Mitigation and monitoring developed in the EIA process is implemented. Then honest, because full EIA study must consider real alternatives. Impact must be assessed honestly. Transparent and accessible. EIA products must be very clear and accessible to key actors. Everybody should be able to access to that. Not hidden. Not confidential. Potential impacts on environment. So now we talk about what are the impacts it can produce in environment, because that is the purpose of finding that a change in systems exerts certain influence on the many different environmental parameters, right? Any changes in system will affect other parameters, resulting in net positive and net negative impacts in the environment. We'll see some examples. Ecological impacts, for example, fisheries. Negative impacts: road prevents longitudinal lateral migration of the fishes in the floodplains. Whether or not will go longitudinal laterally. We are talking about the road constructions, the road. So now, what happened? It affects fisheries, obstruct the movement of the fishes into the natural feedings, or breeding grounds in the floodplains. Okay, so the ecological impacts. So there was more negatives. Forest. Roads running through the forest areas and plantation may be cause of destruction of trees and forest. The negative impacts: alteration in ecology and forest. Plantations. The road side may be used for plantation of trees, which is favorable to impact the road construction. So this is positive, small but positive. Wetland and wetland habitats. The road may encroach the wetlands, which may alter the ecology of wetlands and may cause the destruction of wetland habitats. Nuisance plants and eutrophication. So they are negative. Wetland will affect it. The roads running through the forest and plantation is caused to be destruction of trees and all things. So nuisance in the plants, and sometimes some due to some leaching out these agricultural fertilizers, eutrophication may take the overgrowth, and which blocks the exchange with the air, and so become septic conditions in the water bodies. So these things also can happen. The road can create that because it doesn't allow the free flow of the water bodies, especially. You may have culvert and all things, but still it will affect it. It doesn't have free flow for that. So the negatives. Physical. We are talking about ecological aspects. So these 5 is talked about that. Now we talk about physical effect. Physical, chemical. So this is the physical effects. So we talk about one is biological, physical, and social. So this is physical. But physical, chemical is both are considered physical. Erosion, siltations, because they cause erosions of the flood and siltation downstreams. Siltation means what? The sediments come, deposits. First thing of the drainage congestions and waterlogging. Roads interfere with the cross drainage and can cause the flooding of drainage congestion adjacent areas during the periods high precipitations. It may also cause crop damage, water pollution, and breeding of mosquitoes, because in stagnants will lead to that. So there are physiochemical effects. Regional hydrology and flooding. Road construction across the flood plains perpendicular to the direction of the water flow cause backwater effect and increase duration, frequency, and extent of the flooding in upstream. It obstructs the waste water flow. Roads may obstruct the drainage of the sewage and industrial wastewater, leading to serious pollution problems. So wastewater flow will obstruct that. Dust and noise pollution. Dust raised by the unpaved rural roads. If the road is unpaved rural, then dust will be much more. And blown by the vehicles can cause the health hazards and drainage and damage the vegetation along the sides of the roads. What human interest? We talk about what is the effects on the because human is so one type of biological impacts. Loss of agricultural lands. It's also social impacts, because in a social impacts. So here agricultural lands are affected. So the occupation affected. Construction of many lands has to do with the loss of agricultural lands, because they're consuming the lands to make that. Generation of employment. Okay, this is one advantage, small advantage, that some people can get employment. Road generates temporarily employment during the project implementation, permanent employment during the maintenance phase. Then navigation and boat communications. Okay, roads interfere with the navigation and boat communication, at least for certain periods of the year. What else? Human interest. Commercial and service facilities. The Thana roads provide benefits. We talked about an example of Thana roads. Thana is a place in Tamil Nadu. Thana cyclone was there. Communication and transport facilities. Industrial activities. It involves road communication, promotes the industrial activities. Irrigation activities. So these positive things. But here getting some fast communication, transportation, some road communication, provide the industrial activities. It can also irrigation facilities, borrow pits inside of the roads, provide facilities for small scale irrigations. Non-negative landscape, scattered borrow pits, unauthorized growth around the roads, and erosion, resorption, marred landscapes. So now if we evaluate that, see ecological, fisheries, forest, tree plantation, wetland habitation, nuisance, plant eutrophication, these things we just discussed. Physical siltation, all things discussed. Now each of them has a relative importance values. Which fisheries, if 5, 10 importance, forest 5, tree plantation 2, 4, 1, So there are different importance values given. They are not equally important. This is most more important because it all depends on occupation of the people, depends on location, geography, because many people depend on that. In that case, it's more important. And the environment is very susceptible to particular situation, we can have more impact. So that's why interdisciplinary group is required for that. That's why public hearing also important for that. Based on that, which criteria have importance the criteria. Now this is the impact, negative, positive impacts. Negative impacts, the grading 0 to 5, -5 to +5. And then based on these two scores, we are added together sum. So now this is the ecological aspects. It will be EIV, environmental impact value is -19, and for physiochemical is -13. Similarly, carried out for human interest is sociological. So here there are positive, negative together +23, and total environmental impact value is -5. So now different alternatives has to be evaluated based on that. Then after that, project terms and references are referred. It refers to going public for the following should be determined. Number one, development of mix and a development mix. Maybe some combination may be there. So you can propose something based on different alternative mix. Budget for planning and development cost. And now this budget also include the includes the mitigation measures. Then what is program for approval? Time scale for development, what is time scale development? An option for alternative location process. What other alternative location process involved there? And budget for construction, operation, restoration if appropriate. So restoration also into mitigation. So all these criteria now should be determined. Then I will go to public. Is any public participation in environmental impact assessment? So you can see here one public participation in environmental impact assessment obligations formally required public inspections and public display as per Article 14. In scoping process phase, 30 days MEPPPC websites, written comment, and this is a particular website where you can have that. There is given 30 days will be in the website, will be exposed, so that anybody at that time can have written complaints. As part of EIA procedure, 30 days public inspection or public display, spoken and written comments. Oh, don't do anything. Nothing here. Okay. If you do anything, it will be disconnected. The video will be stopped in between. I'll face problem. 2 hours will be wasted for me. So, a positive outcome is expected. The formal PP needs public participation, needs public stakeholders trust in a project development and authorities, transparent and convincing informations, provisions, consult. So, if it is positive, that means public participation. If you are finding that outcome is positive outcome, means plus is more. In that case, we can have public stakeholders trust in the project developer and authorities. Naturally, we will have more trust on that. Transparent, convincing information provision, provide information, because you have already analyzed that. Consultation events with engagement of all the actors and external facilitators we can discuss. Regulation on information and participation of the public participation concerned in all matters. But what is the relevant information for the stakeholders? This is called consultation or public debates. Objective here is to respond to the input of the public. Formalized process, public inspection display. Public display means what? Meeting with the competent authorities, developer and persons in charge for the impact studies. Only opinion, objections and proposals are considered, which refers to submission of information were submitted within the introspection period in 30 days. This is called only opinion. Display and opinion. Now what happened? This consultation means public debate. They can have direct interaction with them, let's say. Here is only reporting. Often generates wrong expectations, because this approach of just introspection display, inspection display, public can see and they can read the display and they can comment and written. It has some wrong expectations. Why? Stakeholders may make efforts to respond to public information provided to the authorities, because they expect response, acknowledgement, consideration, but no formal legal requirement for this. Building trust requires feedback mechanism stakeholders. So building trust, public debate is now more preferable than just inspection display. Public display could design for more interactive process. Display also will have interaction where people can give feedback, comments there itself. So they are designing public participation and EIA for project development, active participation, EIA preparation stage, and EIA study, preparation, EIA presentation, EIA implementation. So you can see all these stages. You can have public. Here it's directly going streamline. A preparation phase where no public. Here public can influence it everywhere. So it will be much more smooth, much more coverage. So now you just saw that, just summary of that. Project preparation first, notification to competent authorities. I told in Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So the notification to the information MEPPC I'm taking, it is actually Environmental Impact Ministry of Environmental Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So this is standardized formula they used, so you can change that. I'll change it in the PPT I'm going to present. Then screening stage, again project according to the annexures, so you have to check the annexures. Scoping stage, facultative for the developers. So the developers, too hard you can cover. Environmental study stage, the developer means the organizers. Submission environmental authorities, informations to competent authorities. So here formal start will start in 4 months procedures. Then appoint the technical advisory committees, organization. This in our case, Ministry of Climate Change, Minister of Forest and Climate Change, Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So they'll provide their advisory committees to evaluate, review the adequacy of the environmental information. So the base session, the approval EIA is taken place. I'll show you more details in the website itself. So here public participation, every step required. Initial public dialogues, consultation, first phase and display. Ongoing consultations. Then after discussed before that. Okay, after the review, then it comes the submission of environmental information to competent authorities. The review of the adequacy of the environmental informations. So for that, the sessions approval EIA studies. Consultation of statutory environmental authorities. Where public debate, public inspection, public displays part of that. Consideration of environmental information by the competent authorities, their comments and review. Announcement of decisions and post-decision monitoring is if project is granted to consent. They keep monitoring that. So here ongoing consultation will go with joint assessment with public, documentation, impact of public opinion, objective proposals with public involvement. So now here's some exercise you can do. But you don't practice. Goal of participation, what do you want to get out of it? What is public participations? What is the task for doing that? For public participation, we have to add a goal of participation. What do you want to get out of that? Means building trust is one objective, improving the cooperation with stakeholders, increasing transparency, getting information, getting support. Well, you have to support it, reducing resistance, or whatever you want for that. Target audience, who are the stakeholders, organization, persons, or representatives? What are their expertise and interest? Do they have the resource to participate? What timing, what level of participation? How much time you give, how much level of participation, what intensity of participation you want? What is the timing and start before EIA procedures or in parallelly will continue. Level, information, consultation and active involvement. How do you like to involve them? Whether it's, for example, every Thursday, whether involved or is like, one time, all the things. Or is, without any intervals. Process, organization, facilitators, methods, tools, budgets. So all the things will be taken into account for designing a proper public participation process. So you can have 5-6 groups on different topics, and best one you can develop that. This one of the practice you can do that. Then choose the project you think about the supporting with PP. Think of a project. Why do you want the PP activities for the project? Do you want the increase in understanding of the projects? Similarly, do you want to learn more about the potential impacts of the projects? Do you want to gather information data? Do you want to improve? So you can go through that. These are all descriptive. You will understand it easily. So this can be utilized as a template to get an over understanding how to design such a process. Implementing public participation, how to facilitate the process with respect to budget, time, resources, designing for that, how much cost for preparing, presenting information. There are cost with respect to public participation. Then what are methods are going to follow? Presentation method, website method, fact sheets, articles, or geographical information, all the things, or consultations, or feedback, comments, and all the things, hearings, or active participation, interactive supports, or active listening exercises. So there are different tools you can utilize for that. Active listening to understand the other persons and build the trust. In that case, you don't ask the closed questions, yes or no. If you want to get their interest, trust, then don't ask yes or no. Don't ask multiple choice ABC. Don't know suggestive answers. You agree, don't agree. Don't give your own opinions. Don't argue. This is the biggest trap. If you argue, then you will not get their opinions. Do not correct mistakes. Don't impose your knowledge. Do not interrupt. Let the speaker speak. So there are some of the things important. And day-to-day life also is important for relationship. Active listening to understand other persons. Open question: how, what, why. This type of question. Summarize the structure of the conversation and help to check understanding right. Detailing and verifications. Do you see more problems? Can you give more examples like this? Like this, yes. You can keep on encouraging them to speak. Silence, people do not like silence. After 4 seconds, someone will talk. So non-verbal communication, eye contact, attentive gesture, this thing can be useful for that. Following constitute principal elements in the national regulatory. So most of the information the procedures have taken from EIA for the EPA. So let's say modification of that. Because everybody followed the EPA systems. But the presentation I am going to give you, in that case I modify wherever this organization part I will modify in terms of pollution, India's pollution control boards. I mean not pollution control board, India's ministry informations. So there is requirement of EIA and respective activities likely to have significant impacts, critical procedures for determining which activity require EIA, and institutional arrangements and communication procedures and timetables, and format requirement EIA reports, review of EIA, public participation, decision-making process, appeals from decisions of authorized bodies, transboundary impacts, continuous monitoring. All these things are different principal element of a good EIA report. And these are procedures. I already discussed about that. Screening, scoping, baseline studies, impact assessment, significance, mitigation, application, and environmental statements, environmental statement, and monitoring. Okay. So, and each stage will involve consultations. We'll discuss more about this in other units also. So, this screening. So, it decided that we already just summary of that. Screening is the process by which you decide EIA is required or not. And here screening criteria need to be EIA, characteristics of the development, location, characteristics, and key significant criteria of more than local importance, in particular sensitive vulnerable locations when potentially complex hazardous effects, and schedule on projects, which means that initial EIA only required are the ones that are major or most polluting development. Many types of thresholds below which they are scheduled. 2 projects on threshold there, like pipeline below this much diameter, or this much shorter than this much length, or this much total area. Like this, some threshold they give. These are schedules. Initial preliminary required or detail required. So the screening, these are some of the procedures. Projects we are on a screening schedule 1 projects. You can see these things are required. Initial studies only required. 2 projects will have less straightforward to identify. And appendix 3 of EIA guides to procedures, and set the description of threshold criteria for that. So Schedule 2 project has to be listed in Schedule 2, and be the whole or a part of the sensitive area. In that case, also some area sensitive. Here also you have to do that, even if it's not listed in Schedule 2. Or meet criteria exceeds. If threshold is too much high, then also you have to do it. All 3 you see. Sensitive area you can do it. In schedule what list there you have to do it. Or it is increasing the threshold limits for impacts or basic assessment, then you have to do it. In example, wastewater treatment plant, treating effluent from this. So this net EIA, Schedule 1 projects, this much. Now more than 1.5 lakhs effluent productions, and in that case you have to go Schedule 2 if required, if formally considered, if it's more than so, and then go for screening. Continuous screening. Schedule 2 projects, just because projects listed in Schedule 2 is falling into sensitive area, does not automatically means that EIA is necessary. Sensitive area only falling is not necessary. You have to, this sensitive area may be designed in areas that may be affected by the projects having agreed to existing land use, relative abundance of quantity, and absorption capacity of the land. All these are considered. Only sensitive area is not sufficient. You have to also consider these parameters. Is satisfied, then only sensitive area, then you go for Schedule 2 projects. In each of the case, so that's why expertise is required for that. We'll discuss some of the things more details. It's just a basics. Environmental arising from the development will be significant on the part of particular location. Particular location may be significant, another location may not be. So they are Schedule 2 project list. These are things must be required. Then screening conclusion, judgment, case-to-case basis, awareness and culmination effects of other proposal developments. Then what are screening options? You have to obtain to screening opinions you are provided. What is screening opinion? Location plan, brief description of the nature and purpose of the project, possible scale of the environmental effects, other representation is required. So planning authorities may seek advice from the statutory and non-statutory consultees at this stage, be influenced by public response, raising decisions, has to provide a screening opinion within 3 weeks of receiving the request. And screening opinions should include the aspects, but include the development of the environmental effects which are planning authorities consider significant and has to be made available to public inspection together with developer's request. Then screening directions and Secretary of State. So there more details are there. I don't think it is necessary for you to, for your examination point of course, but I'm just giving information and I'm not discussing on that because you go through this. This is quite explanatory. The developer disagrees with the planning authority's opinion. When authorities fails to provide in 3 months. So these are the conditions which may ask for screening direction. Secretary of State also be asked for screening directions. Otherwise, it may not be required for that directions. State Secretary of the State has to provide within 3 weeks time. So there's information which legal informations, legislative information. So such opinions are not confidential. The project will be appear to public domain. The developers are advised to manage. Then screening. Under circumstances, EIA is deemed to have been required. Planning authorities has given opinions. Formal request that project has to be subject to EIA, and the opinion is not challenged. In that case, or ruling from the state authority has not been requested. Or promoters or volunteers ES, which states that ES is in accordance with the regulations. Or promoter and authorities have formally agreed to the ES should be prepared. So these are conditions where it is necessary to done. So this is not scoping. Now similarly I have given more details of scoping. This I am not discussing now. You please go through. Because you will be able to understand after going through. When in doubts, you will have separate session for that. The scoping includes the legislative aspects of that. And also environmental aspects of that. Flora, fauna is affected by that, but architectural or archaeological heritage is affected by that, landscape, other things. Interrelationship. Quality of scoping, which influence the quality of environmental statement. Then there are different aspects of scoping. Then we cover about the different procedures of scoping, what is plan, description of that, other informations. And you will be discussing, as you're discussing a specific aspect, this will be covered, more details. Then scoping opinions, just like screening opinions, scoping opinions, and what will I find out from that. And then checklist for EIA and scoping, and legal matrix for scoping. Each of the aspects benefits it can go through that long term, short term. We'll cover some of the things. Scoping exercises, and then scoping, and then scoping exercise. Given something, reviews and relevant development plans, review the government. So we'll discuss more about that. So some exercise will cover that, where you can see some of the actual project, EIA projects, and from that you carry out some of these screening and scoping activities. And communications. And then over baseline studies, consultations. Extra consultation required. So consultation, what is involvement in that? There's a consultation, preliminary consultation, EIA consultations, then covering that what are the statutory, non-statutory aspects of that, and formal consultations, adverse environmental effect, then mitigations. Mitigation covers about this. There's mitigations, but assessment significance to study it. All these different tools are used for that these studies, and mitigation measures. So mitigation, what are the different steps to reduce that? So mitigation should be considered in commencement of the project designs itself. From beginning itself, the dam may be curved, shallow, may be provided to wildfowl, all the different aspects, reservoirs include. So some mitigation measures. So you can go through more details about this. If I avoid impacts, best, and compensate for it is least. Reduce impact, next one. A remedy of the damage and compensation, least one. So mitigation hierarchy. For the different options, for the different mitigation measures. Avoid at source, avoid the machinery. So the examples of that. You go through. These are all interesting. You can understand yourself. Different alternative options, commitment. So as some examples are given, obstruction of fees, obstruction to the mitigation of mitigation of fees. Then what is the impact? Same as one. loss in fish breeding, loss of breeding and nursery and feeding grounds, and these are problems. The impact reduction in the fish proteins consumption and unemployment of the fisher. Now mitigation allow control flooding and compensate the loss by the culture. So this type of, so you can see that interesting. You can go through different mitigation measures. Cutting trees, what is the mitigation for that? Nuisance plants, all the aspects are discussed. You can go through this. Back to. Okay, thank you. I hope now you understand the gravity of this, how important it is. We'll discuss more details with the practical examples. But I request before that, please go through these slides, especially these examples I discussed, which is very useful. Thank you.